Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and as you guys know, I am a cartoonist. My favorite thing in art is making things really exaggerated, playing with shape, and just really making it look not real. So every once in a while, just to sort of ground myself and challenge myself, I try to draw in as close to perfect realism as I can. I've done this challenge 2 times before. The very first time I did it, I can't believe that I ever thought that was realism. I mean, I know everybody improves as they continue their art journey, but I'm just really surprised I was satisfied enough with that to post on YouTube. The next one is not as bad, but it's still very flat. There's a lot of things about it that look really cartoony still, and I think I was more emulating the semi-realistic painters who I admired more than I was the photo references that I was supposedly using. So this time I wanted to really focus and try to get as much of a sense of depth and shape as I possibly could to avoid that flatness in this particular version. So the way that I did that is I started with just a tonal version, which basically just means that you're doing it in black and white. You're not worrying about color at all. You're not getting distracted with any of that. You're just trying to think about the shadows and the planes of the face. This was undoubtedly the most hellish and difficult part of the entire process. Even just trying to get the facial features all in the right place, in the right proportion, in this grayscale version was extremely challenging, and I am glad that I tried to start with a tonal version because it really helped me think about things as shapes and not lines, which is something that is a really hard habit to break if that's how you're used to drawing. You can even see me trying to make sense of these shapes that I've made by drawing line art over top of them, but I end up just blending that all out and sticking with my original plan. So I was looking at a variety of different photos. I tried to collect up a few, and I wasn't using any one to, be a direct copy. Obviously, I want it to look like my character. So I tried to use them all for different things. I even used a photo of my own face, even though I didn't really think that Babs would end up looking like me, but just to use as a lighting reference because I wanted to know where the light was coming from in my reference photo, and the only way I could figure out how to do that is by taking it myself. And I used a variety of different facial features from individual girls' pictures to try to make Babs look like her own person, but also look relatively real. I continually struggled with my desire to make her eyes too big and her nose and mouth too small. This is something I anticipated, but it was still very frustrating to constantly be butting up against. But I guess this is what happens when you're used to cartooning all the time. My process kind of ended up with me sort of defining things out, marking things down with this square brush I was using, and then blending it. And I would do that over and over until it started to feel like I was kind of sculpting, which is what I really wanted. So basically, and this is not for everything, but usually if I'm trying to show an area of her face that is pushed out, I was trying to use lighter colors like on her cheekbone and the tip of her nose, and then when I was trying to push something back in space, I would make it darker. So obviously the sockets of her eyes. This is where I ran into some trouble because I wanted her eyes to look light and bright because she has light eyes in the comic, but then she started to look a little bit crazy, like she has cosplay color contacts in or something, or maybe that she's possessed, so I had to try and sort of dull those down a little bit. I really was getting frustrated because I was something about this is just not looking I like how it looks, but it doesn't look realistic. It still looks stylized, it still looks off, and I thought it was just her eyelids, which is your eyelids are actually a super important part of your eye, but in cartoons you don't really draw them usually, or not extensively, whereas in real life your eyelids are a major part of what makes your eye look like your eye. So I had to try and make sure I wasn't leaving them out, as I had done in previous sort of efforts. I also really wanted her to actually have an expression this time, even though it's relatively mild in the picture that I'm referencing of Babs. I wanted her to look concerned or worried like she does in it, because in both my previous versions she doesn't look like she's feeling much of anything. In the first version she's kind of smiling a little bit, which doesn't make any sense, and then in the second version she's completely blank. I ended up using the liquefy tool just to make her eyes a little smaller, her nose and mouth a little bigger, because I was just driven mad by every time I rendered it out, I realized I had done this again and made her look too anime, so I ended up just sort of like doing that by hand in the liquify tool, and then it was finally time to start adding color. Now the way I did this is I just went underneath this tonal layer. I made this tonal layer a multiply layer, and then it sort of took on the color of everything I was doing underneath. It still looks a little muddy and grayish, kind of like if you put copy markers over like a graphite sketch, but that's totally fine for now. I just wanted to start sort of like blocking out the colors and seeing how that would affect the tone. I also ended up taking that color layer, duplicating it and putting it on top as well, and then I put it on like a light layer or a overlay, something like that, to try to sandwich the like pigments over my more gray toned like, I don't know if you call it a sketch, my tonal sketch. And at this point, I felt like I had a strong enough base to start actually painting over it and adding in some things that were actually going to stay in the final version. The other thing that I really tried to focus on this time was I tried not to rush. Now, I know that portraits, realistic portraits particularly, often take people days to make, and I'm the type of person who likes to draw and have it be done in like 20 or 30 minutes. So it was really hard for me. My brain kept telling me like, oh, you should be finishing this up now. Like, this is taking way too long. Why are you doing this for so long? And I really had to like calm down and be like, hey, you have all the time in the world. Just like give it the detail and the attention that it deserves. I didn't really talk about this too much on YouTube, but I used to have kind of a weird relationship with drawing things realistically. I think I became sort of rebellious towards it because I felt like cartoons were always getting disrespected, and it felt like for me to try and paint or draw realistically on my own time, when no teacher was making me or anything, it felt like a betrayal of the style that I love so much. But luckily nowadays, I really just see it as what it is. It's a fun, enjoyable, relaxing thing to try out and a good way to challenge yourself. I think creating obligation around certain styles or certain ways of painting or drawing is really just detrimental to artists' creativity, and it's not going to encourage them to do it anymore. So it's something that I kind of had to overcome over time, especially with the kind of hostile nature of the internet, and the sort of battle in the art community between people who really like expressive stuff and people who really like realistic stuff. That whole like art elitism, classical artists versus cartoonists, Cal art style, whatever, art drama nonsense. It really pushed me away from realism, but this is the first time that I've done this challenge and really just felt like I was enjoying myself. I mean, it was stressful and frustrating because it's not something I'm naturally good at, but most of the time I was actually just really enjoying the challenge, enjoying the struggle. And I think that's something that is really important to figure out how to do if you're going to want to be an artist. There's always going to be days, even if you're drawing in your normal, usual style, where it is a fight and a struggle to get it to look the way that you want. And sometimes you have to step away, sometimes you have to come back to something you're not proud of and try and fix it. And if you can find a way to enjoy that sort of like conflict within yourself, you're going to have a much easier time getting better in the art field. One of the parts that I liked the most about this whole process was adding in little details that I had ignored previously. It was really satisfying to go back and sort of put in everything that I had kind of regretted I had left out in the one I did last year. So things like I put a little blue by her eye, because that's where you like have eye bags and stuff, and it just made it look a lot more realistic. I felt like friggin' Caravaggio or something. Like I was like, I was born to paint skin. I am a realism legend. And I tried to put in a little more detail and better hair. I still think her hair looks kind of messed up, but I tried to make it look decent. I really focused on her face. I really love like John Singer Sargent's style of really focusing on like the face, and then everything else sort of comes apart a little bit in a painterly sort of way. I know that's not pure realism, but as far as realistic painters, he's my favorite, so that definitely sort of played a role. As for how long this actually took me 2 hours and 20 minutes. It felt like I was painting for a lot longer than that. I think it's just because I was out of my element. I seriously thought I was going to look at the footage and find it to be 5 hours or something like that. I was really surprised that I got the whole thing done in 2:20. If anything, I feel like I wouldn't have stopped where I stopped if I had known that it had only been about the length of a Marvel movie. But I felt like it was finished. I don't know, internally. I felt like it was done. There are still so many things that I wish I could change about this piece, to be honest, particularly areas around her neck, collar, and around her hair. I just felt like those areas were the parts that I kind of like blew off because I had spent so much time on the face, and I was sort of just like tiring. My brain was tired of looking at this, and I felt like I was losing all objectivity, which is a dangerous thing to happen because then you could make a bunch of weird choices on your piece that will ruin it. But here's the whole process crunched into like a 10-second little loop. And yeah, this is how it turned out. I hope you guys like her. She's still not perfectly realistic, of course. I don't think I'll ever get into like photorealistic territory, but I'm still really proud of my progression. I feel like I made big strides since last time, which is all you can ask for. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you later. Bye. Thank you to all of my patrons, including Razor57, Zephyr Artplace, Aubrey Schmidt, Wulu Luna, Rusu, Lily Allure, Hazel Tiffia, Elizabeth Ward, The Expressive Poker Face, Small Ghost, Morrissey Axolotl, Big McLarge Huge, Emily Leviers, Christopher, Sparky Plays, Subaki, Juliana Davis, Yume Lily, John Muscat, Snow White Schmako, Hidden Squid, The Becky, Liliana Hammondtree, Lauren, Fabletel, Mia Lavely, Angel File, Q Musgrove, Trace, Nicole Ludwalk, Nicolette Queen, Rune Raincrow, Rainwater Pearls, Ice Cream Pal, Best Kaiju Lion, Tom David Johansson, Storm Scribbles, Ivan Rodriguez, Ilaria Louie, Nora Cornelison, Joseph Copel, Clockwork Construct, Dr. Casket, your boy SD, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.